You think you can walk away? I'll tear it all apart! What have you done? This is what you get!
This won't solve anything.
Take that fake tuxedo out of here, now! The manager's hand shot forward and yanked hard at the lapel. The shoulder seam tore open across the chest, and black silk sagged loose like a broken wing. Darius Whitaker stared at the damage and spoke with a calm that did not match the scene around him. "I'm the groom. My wedding is being held here today." The manager laughed directly in his face. "You expect me to believe that? We don't host cheap little parties for people who wander in off the street. Take your ceremony somewhere else." The ruined jacket slipped toward the marble floor. "Get out," the manager snapped. "Stop wasting my time." Phones were already rising around the lobby. A florist covered her mouth. The string quartet stopped tuning in the middle of a note. Darius bent down, picked up the tuxedo he had planned to wear when he married the woman he loved, and folded it slowly over his arm. The manager had just made the worst mistake of his career. He simply did not know it yet. Earlier that morning, a quiet brownstone in Georgetown sat beneath the soft blue light before sunrise. The street was nearly silent. Somewhere in the distance, a newspaper landed on a porch. A dog walker moved along the next block. Darius Whitaker was already awake. Coffee hissed in the kitchen. Steam curled against the dark window as he poured one mug, black, no sugar, then opened his laptop on the marble island. 2 emails were waiting. The first came from his mergers and acquisitions team. The subject line reminded him that the Whitfield acquisition remained confidential and that the silence period was still in effect. Darius stared at the message for a long moment. Not long before, Whitaker Holdings, the private equity firm he had built from nothing, had completed the largest acquisition of his career. The company had purchased Whitfield Hospitality Group, a collection of 12 luxury venues across the mid-Atlantic. Almost no one at Whitfield knew yet. Not the staff, not the property managers, not even Camille Bennett, the woman Darius was about to marry. He had thought seriously about telling her. More than once, he had nearly done it. But the public announcement had already been scheduled, and Darius wanted Camille to have one day untouched by business. No acquisition calls, no reporters, no financial headlines. Just their wedding, their families, and one perfect memory before they left for St. Lucia. He planned to tell her on the plane. That decision, made quietly in the same kitchen with the same cup of coffee in his hand, would soon become one of the decisions he regretted most. He closed the message. The second email came from his future mother-in-law. The subject line simply asked for help with the seating chart. For the first time that morning, Darius smiled. He moved to the dining room and laid his tuxedo across the table. It was hand-tailored brioni, made from Italian wool so fine that it seemed to resist every wrinkle. He had bought it months earlier from a quiet shop in Manhattan. The tailor measured him twice, adjusted every line by hand, and presented a bill for $9,000. Darius had paid without hesitation. But on the morning of his wedding, he ironed the tuxedo himself. Slowly, carefully. He pressed the cuffs with the kind of concentration most people saved for something far more serious. And while he worked, he thought about his grandfather. Elijah Whitaker had spent 41 years working in a steel mill in Pittsburgh. He had never owned a suit that did not come from a department store catalog. Every Sunday morning before church, Elijah would stand in his undershirt beside an ironing board near the kitchen window and press the one good shirt he owned. He used to tell Darius, "A man takes care of his own clothes, son. Nobody else loves them the way you do." Darius pressed the tuxedo lapel flat. He checked the small velvet ring box twice. Then, alone in the room, he whispered, "Don't mess this up, Darius." Later, he left the brownstone in a modest black sedan. No driver, no security detail. The garment bag rested carefully across the back seat. A duffel sat beside him, carrying his father's cufflinks and the gold pocket watch his grandfather had given him many years before. As the sun rose over the Potomac, Darius drove toward the Whitfield Grand Manor. He was arriving far earlier than anyone expected, not because he was nervous, not because he was suspicious. The reason was much simpler. Camille's father, Curtis Bennett, had driven a city bus in Washington, District of Columbia, for 31 years. He spent much of that life working the U Street route. He saved whatever he could after rent and bills so his daughter could attend Howard Law. When Camille told him she had made partner at Barrett and Lane, Curtis sat on his couch and cried. At the wedding, Curtis would walk his daughter down the stone garden path at the Whitfield Grand Manor. They would pass the fountain in a long row of white peonies. Then he would place Camille's hand into Darius's. Darius wanted a little time alone in those gardens before that happened. He wanted to stand where Curtis would stand. He wanted to imagine Camille coming toward him before the photographers, planners, relatives, music, and guests filled every corner of the moment. The Whitfield Grand Manor appeared at the end of a long drive lined with old oak trees. The colonial estate rose 3 stories high, framed by white columns and carrying the weight of 2 centuries in its stone and wood. Gravel crunched beneath Darius's tires. He parked, collected the garment bag and duffel, and walked toward the entrance. He had no idea that the man pacing inside the lobby with a cold cup of coffee in his hand was about to make a series of choices that would destroy nearly everything he had spent years building. Vernon Caldwell stood in the center of the Whitfield Grand Manor lobby with a clipboard he did not need. He was in his mid-50s, with silver at his temples, a navy suit, and a gold pin on his lapel, identifying him as the general manager. He had managed the property for 15 years, and he enjoyed reminding people of that fact. His phone buzzed. A message from Natalie Foster, the event coordinator assigned to the wedding, explained that traffic had delayed her and asked whether someone could cover the lobby until she arrived. Vernon exhaled sharply. He could have sent a junior employee. He could have remained in his office. Instead, he chose to patrol the lobby himself. Vernon liked being seen. He liked the way guests noticed the gold pin on his lapel. He liked hearing the word, sir. He liked the small authority that came from standing in a beautiful building and deciding who seemed worthy of it. What he did not know was that corporate had quietly been building a file on him. He did not know that discrimination complaints involving black and brown guests had accumulated over the years. He did not know that Whitfield Hospitality Group had recently changed ownership. He did not know that the man who now owned the company was about to walk through the front doors carrying a garment bag. All Vernon knew was that he was in a foul mood, and when Vernon Caldwell was in a foul mood, someone else usually paid for it. The lobby doors opened. Cool morning air moved across the marble floor. Darius Whitaker stepped inside carrying his garment bag and duffel. Vernon's eyes locked onto him from across the room. His posture changed almost immediately. His chest pushed forward. His jaw tightened. The clipboard disappeared beneath one arm as he crossed the lobby with quick, hard steps. "Take that fake tuxedo out of here before you embarrass yourself," Vernon said. Darius stopped. He did not turn his head immediately. He simply froze in the middle of a step, like a man who had heard that tone before and already understood what it meant. Vernon reached forward without permission. His hand closed around the lapel area of the garment bag and pulled. The fabric inside tore. The shoulder seam opened across the chest. The torn black material slipped partly out of the bag. A florist standing near the wall covered her mouth with both hands. The string quartet stopped tuning. A bellhop beside the staircase froze with one hand resting on the brass rail. Darius slowly turned his head. He looked at Vernon, then at the torn tuxedo, then back at Vernon. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "I'm the groom. My wedding is being held here today." The groom. Vernon laughed loudly enough for the sound to bounce off the marble walls. "You expect me to believe that? We have standards here. Take your little ceremony somewhere else." The torn jacket slipped from the garment bag and landed near Darius's shoes. "Leave," Vernon said. "Now." Phones began to rise. A guest near the front desk started recording. 2 florists did the same. Members of the string quartet lifted their phones. A waiter who had been arranging the breakfast buffet stopped working. The bellhop watched without moving. A wedding planner entering through a side door raised her phone too. No one was hiding the cameras anymore. They were pointed directly at Vernon. Darius bent down slowly. He picked up the ruined tuxedo the way someone might gather up something far more valuable than cloth. He folded it once, then again. He draped it carefully over his left forearm. When he stood, he did not yell. He did not curse. He simply looked at Vernon with the quiet focus of a man studying a problem he had already begun to solve. "You can check the booking," Darius said. "The Bennett Whitaker wedding, Magnolia Ballroom." Vernon gave a dismissive laugh. "Natalie isn't here. I don't pull up the system every time somebody walks in claiming to know a name." "Then call her. She has my number." "I'm not calling my coordinator to chase down a stranger's story." "Then look at the printed roster. It's sitting on the front desk a few steps from you." Vernon smiled. It was thin and unpleasant. "Sir, our verification protocol requires the coordinator to confirm a guest's identity before I allow access." Natalie isn't here. Until she arrives, I have a security obligation to ask you to wait outside. There was no such verification protocol in the Whitfield Employee Manual. Vernon had invented it in the moment. He knew that no one was likely to challenge him quickly enough to matter. Darius's jaw tightened, not with rage, with calculation. He ran a private equity firm. He had sat through negotiations that could move hundreds of millions of dollars. He had faced men who tried to intimidate him with lawyers, leverage, and threats. He knew how to let someone reveal themselves. So he gave Vernon one more chance. My driver's license is in my wallet. Would that help? Vernon shrugged. Couldn't hurt. Darius removed his wallet, slid out the license, and handed it over. Vernon held it beneath the chandelier light as though he were inspecting a counterfeit bill. He turned it sideways. He ran a thumbnail over the surface. This looks altered. It's not. I'll decide that. He did not give it back. Renee Lawson, a black wedding planner carrying a clipboard and a flat box of white peonies, set the flowers down and crossed the lobby. Mr. Caldwell, she said, that's the groom. I've been on several planning calls with him. Vernon did not even turn toward her. You're a vendor. Stay in your lane. The booking sheet is right behind you, Renee said. I'll thank you to remain professional. Renee's mouth opened, then closed. She pulled out her phone and began recording. Officer Reed, the morning security guard, had been watching from his post near the front desk. He was in his early 50s and had spent decades in law enforcement before retiring into private security. His eyes kept drifting toward the printed booking sheet lying openly on the desk. Darius's name was there. Top of the page, Bennett Whitaker Wedding, 210 guests. Officer Reed took one step toward the desk. Without turning his head, Vernon snapped, Reed, eyes on the trespasser, not the paperwork. Officer Reed stopped. His hand hovered near the booking sheet. Then he stepped back. His jaw tightened. A vein moved near his temple. He would remember that moment for a very long time. Vernon turned back to Darius, still holding the driver's license between his fingers as though it were something dirty. Where did you get that tuxedo? Is it a rental? We don't accept cheap rental places here. We have standards. Darius said nothing. Vernon reached toward the torn lapel draped over Darius's arm and rubbed the fabric between his thumb and forefinger. Polyester blend, he said. I knew it. The Bryony label was sewn inside the collar, barely an inch from his hand. Pure Italian wool, hand-stitched, the kind of garment a master tailor spends months shaping. Vernon never looked at the label. He did not need facts. He had already decided what he believed. Darius's voice dropped slightly. Please don't touch the suit. Sir, Vernon replied, for venue safety, I need to inspect any item entering the main hall. Venue safety was another phrase that did not appear in the Whitfield manual. Near the bay window, an older white woman watched with one hand pressed flat against her chest. She was the mother of one of Camille's college friends. She whispered something to her husband. He slowly shook his head. Darius took out his phone. His thumb hovered over Camille's name, then moved to another contact. Marissa. He did not call yet. Some part of him still believed the situation could end without an explosion. If he stayed calm, he thought, maybe Vernon would finally glance at the booking sheet, see the name Darius Whitaker printed in black ink, and realize what he had done. That belief did not survive much longer. Vernon dropped the driver's license onto the marble floor beside the ruined tuxedo. Pick that up and walk yourself out of my building, Vernon said. I won't ask again. The lobby fell completely silent. Even the musicians seemed afraid to breathe. Darius looked down. His license lay on the floor. His torn wedding jacket rested beside it. 2 pieces of his life, discarded on the marble of the place where he was supposed to marry Camille. He inhaled slowly through his nose, held the breath, then let it out. He looked directly into Vernon's eyes. I'm going to ask you one last time. Check the booking system, call your coordinator, or look at the printed roster. Pick one. Vernon's smile widened. He was enjoying himself now. Or what? He said. You're going to sue me. Then he turned toward Officer Reed. Escort this gentleman to the side parking area until we can verify him. Standard procedure. Officer Reed did not move. Vernon turned slightly. Reed. The officer swallowed. Then he stepped toward Darius. His right hand rose and rested lightly on Darius's elbow. Not a grip. Almost an apology. Sir, please come with me. Darius looked down at the hand on his arm, then up at Officer Reed. There was no anger in his face, only a silent question. Are you really going to do this? Officer Reed could not hold his gaze. His eyes dropped. Darius planted his feet. He did not pull away. He simply stopped moving. "Officer, I'm not going outside. I'm a guest. The booking sheet is on the desk behind you. You can see my name from here." Vernon's patience snapped. "For God's sake, Reed, if you can't do your job." He pushed past the officer. Both hands grabbed the strap of Darius's duffel. He yanked. The strap slid from Darius's shoulder. The bag swung low before Vernon dragged it to a console table against the wall. He dropped it, unzipped it, and began pulling things out. "For everyone's safety," Vernon said, "I need to inspect this bag. You don't have my consent to search that. Don't tell me how to do my job." Black silk socks came out first. Then a small leather case containing Darius's father's silver cufflinks engraved with a tiny letter W. Vernon dropped the case carelessly onto the table. The clasp opened. The cufflinks scattered. Then his hand found something heavier. He lifted it slowly. A round gold pocket watch hung from a thin chain. The case carried his grandfather's name, Elijah Whitaker, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Steel mill worker, 41 years. Vernon held the watch beneath the light. "Where did you steal this from?" He flipped it over in his palm. His fingers opened too soon. The watch fell. For Darius, the distance between Vernon's hand and the marble floor seemed impossibly long. The gold chain followed behind it. Darius's eyes tracked it downward. His mouth opened slightly, not from surprise, from recognition of what was about to happen. The watch struck the marble with a sharp crack. The crystal split across the face. The hand stopped. Darius dropped to one knee. He did not look at Vernon. He did not look at anyone. He reached toward the broken watch and lifted it gently, the way someone might lift a small injured bird. A sliver of crystal slipped into the flesh of his thumb. A bead of blood appeared. He did not notice. His other hand began to shake. Then his shoulders, not with anger, with grief. The kind of grief that can live quietly inside a person for years, sealed away until one sound, one object, one memory opens the door. Darius turned the watch over. The engraving on the back caught the chandelier light. "For Darius, make us proud, Granddad." The lobby was so quiet that the ticking wall clock seemed suddenly loud. Even Vernon looked uncertain. He had expected shouting. He had expected threats. He had not expected a grown man to kneel on marble with a broken family heirloom in his hands and tears moving silently down his face. When Darius spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My grandfather worked 41 years in a steel mill in Pittsburgh. He gave me this watch when I got into college. He's been gone for years." Darius lifted his eyes toward Vernon. "And you just broke it on the floor." His voice cracked. Renee turned her face away and covered her mouth. The woman near the bay window was crying against her husband's shoulder. The bellhop set down the cloth he had been holding. The waiter stopped pretending to arrange napkins. Darius stood. He slipped the broken watch carefully into his front pocket. Then something in his face changed. Not into rage, into control. The grief went somewhere private. What remained was the man who had built a private equity firm from a rented office. The man who had negotiated deals across glass conference tables without ever needing to raise his voice. The man Vernon Caldwell should have treated with basic dignity from the moment he walked through the door. Vernon, unsettled by the silence and unwilling to admit he might be wrong, doubled down. He grabbed Darius's arm and the damaged tuxedo at the same time, trying to push him toward the side exit. His grip slipped. The already torn seam gave way completely. The right side of the jacket separated with a long, dry rip. Half of the tuxedo hung from Vernon's hand. At that exact moment, the lobby doors opened. Camille Bennett walked in. She wore jeans and a white sweatshirt, her hair tied back, a small velvet ring box in one hand. She had not come dressed as a bride. She had only planned to drop off the rings with her maid of honor, grab a coffee, and continue getting ready. Then she saw the lobby. She saw the broken watch protruding from Darius's pocket. She saw the torn tuxedo hanging from Vernon's hand. She saw blood on Darius's thumb. She saw the driver's license on the floor. She saw phones recording from every direction. And, finally, she saw her future husband's face. Camille did not run. She did not scream. She crossed the lobby the same way she crossed a courtroom. Steady, measured. Her sneakers made almost no sound on the marble. By the time she stopped several feet from Vernon, she was no longer simply the bride. She was Camille Bennett, partner at Barrett & Lane, Civil Rights Division, a lawyer with more than 100 published opinions and a reputation for never wasting a question. Vernon raised one hand. "Ma'am, this doesn't concern you." "What is your name and title?" Camille asked. Her voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that filled the marble lobby more completely than a shout. "Excuse me, your full legal name, your title, your employee identification number. State them clearly. There are several phones recording us right now." Vernon's eyes flicked toward the cameras. For the first time, the arithmetic began to change behind his expression. Vernon James Caldwell, General Manager, employee identification number 86205. Camille held his gaze. "I'm Camille Bennett. I am the bride. The man whose tuxedo you just destroyed is my fiancé. The pocket watch you dropped belonged to his grandfather. I am a partner at Barrett and Lane Civil Rights Division." She paused. "In front of multiple witnesses, you have detained a confirmed guest without checking readily available records. You searched personal property without consent. You damaged personal property. You physically interfered with a guest. And the conduct recorded in this room shows a clear pattern of discriminatory profiling that may create serious civil liability under federal law." A long silence followed. "Do you understand what I just said?" Vernon said nothing. Camille nodded once. "I'll take that as a yes." Then she turned to Darius. Her face softened. She took his bleeding hand in hers. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Darius squeezed her hand once, then let go. He walked toward the bay window where the morning light was strongest and pulled out his phone. There was a faint smear of blood on the screen. He scrolled past Camille, past his mother, past his mergers and acquisitions team, then stopped on one name, Marissa Vaughn. He called. She answered almost immediately. "Marissa, I'm at the manor. The property we just acquired." A pause. Across town, Marissa Vaughn, Chief of Staff for Whitaker Holdings, sat at her dining table with green tea and the morning paper. She set the cup down. "I need you and Celeste here. Bring the full acquisition disclosure packet, Vernon Caldwell's personnel file, and the termination for cause documents." Another pause. "Marissa, the silence period ends today." Darius disconnected the call. Then he turned back toward Vernon. Half of the destroyed tuxedo still hung from Vernon's hand. Vernon gave a small, nervous laugh. "Who do you think you are, exactly?" Darius's voice stayed even. "I'm the man who was supposed to announce something later. You just changed the schedule." Vernon's smile disappeared. He did not understand. Not yet, but something in his body seemed to understand before his mind did. The front doors opened again. Natalie Foster rushed into the lobby, flushed and breathless, her tote bag slipping from one shoulder. Apologies were already forming on her lips. Then she stopped. She saw the torn tuxedo, the driver's license on the floor, the damaged pocket watch partly visible in Darius's pocket, Vernon holding half a jacket. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Caldwell, that's Mr. Whitaker. That's the groom. What is happening?" Vernon did not look at her. "Natalie, back office, now." "Sir, I have the contract on my laptop. His name is right there." "Back office, now." Natalie's eyes moved from Darius to Camille, then to Officer Reed. Officer Reed could not meet her gaze. Natalie walked toward the rear corridor, but she did not enter the back office. Instead, she turned into the security camera room. She closed the door, locked it. The small room was dark except for the glow of several monitors. The center screen showed the main lobby in sharp, high-definition color. Natalie took out her phone. She started recording the security footage from the monitor. Then she found a number she had known for years but had never used, the Whitfield Corporate Ethics Hotline. It went to voicemail. Natalie spoke quickly and quietly. "This is Natalie Foster, event coordinator at Whitfield Grand Manor. General Manager Vernon Caldwell has physically confronted and discriminated against a black guest in the main lobby. There is security camera footage. I am preserving it now and uploading a copy to the corporate system. This report is being documented." She ended the call, opened her laptop, copied the video, and began the upload. Outside, two black sport utility vehicles turned into the circular drive. Marissa Vaughn stepped from the first. Charcoal suit, leather portfolio under one arm, hair pulled back neatly. Behind her came Celeste Harper, corporate counsel, wearing a navy blazer. Two human resources directors followed with thick manila folders. When Marissa entered the lobby, the staff members who recognized her went pale. They understood what her presence meant. Corporate counsel did not arrive at a property with senior human resources executives for a casual visit. Marissa crossed the marble floor without slowing. "Mr. Caldwell, step away from Mr. Whitaker, now." Vernon turned. The torn half of the tuxedo slipped from his hand and landed on the marble. "I don't understand. Who are you people?" Celeste opened the leather portfolio. She removed a stiff cream document, notarized and stamped. She held it toward Vernon. Mr. Caldwell, this is the closing certificate for the acquisition of Whitfield Hospitality Group. The acquiring party is Whitaker Holdings Limited Liability Company. The beneficial owner is Darius Whitaker. Vernon read the page, then read it again. His hand began to shake. The paper trembled between his fingers. This was completed recently. Why wasn't anyone told? Mandatory confidentiality period, Celeste said. The public announcement had not yet been made. Mr. Whitaker has chosen to end that confidentiality now. Marissa stepped forward. Mr. Whitaker's company owns this property. He had never set foot inside it before today. He came here as a groom, not as your employer. You turned a private wedding morning into a corporate emergency the moment you chose to treat him this way. The lobby became perfectly still. Vernon's eyes dropped back to the certificate. His knees did not quite give out, but his weight shifted against the front desk. The clipboard slipped from beneath his arm and struck the marble. Darius watched. He did not smile. Marissa turned to Celeste. Celeste removed a black tablet from the portfolio, unlocked it, and handed it over. Marissa held the screen where Vernon could see it. Mr. Caldwell, these are termination for cause documents. The grounds are supported by a personnel file containing years of complaints, internal reviews, and discrimination-related incidents that were not properly addressed. Darius stepped forward. He took the tablet. He looked directly at Vernon. This document was not signed when I walked into this lobby, Darius said. I want you to understand that. When you were standing on this floor with my torn jacket in your hand, you still had a job. He placed his finger on the screen. Then signed. A soft digital tone confirmed the signature. Darius turned the tablet toward Vernon. Read it carefully. Many of the policies listed there are policies you helped enforce. You knew the rules. You chose not to follow them. Vernon did not take the tablet. His hand continued shaking. His mouth was open, but no words came. Celeste stepped in, took the device, and replaced it inside the portfolio. Then she removed a printed termination letter and held it toward Vernon. Mr. Caldwell, your employment with Whitfield Hospitality Group is terminated for cause. Under the terms of your executive agreement, you are forfeiting unvested equity, your bonus pool, and supplemental retirement benefits. The total compensation at risk is approximately $1.4 million. Vernon made a sound that never became a word. I have a family, he managed. My daughter is starting college. Darius's voice remained quiet. Camille's father drove a city bus for 31 years to put her through Howard Law. Don't use your family as a reason to avoid responsibility for what you chose to do. Vernon tried again. I was following building security protocol. The coordinator wasn't here. I had to make a judgment call. Camille stepped beside Darius. There is no building security protocol that requires a general manager to tear a guest's jacket, search his personal bag without consent, or ignore a booking sheet sitting in plain sight. I reviewed the operations manual. You helped write portions of it. You know exactly what it says. The lobby remained silent. Officer Reed straightened. Then he crossed the marble. His steps sounded different now, steadier. He stopped beside Vernon. Mr. Caldwell, surrender your keys, your badge, and your access card. Vernon turned toward him. Reed, don't do this. You and I have known each other for years. Yes, sir, we have. Then you know me. I do, Officer Reed said. And I'm asking for your keys, your badge, and your access card. Vernon reached into his pockets. His fingers did not seem to work properly. The keys slipped from his hand and landed on the marble. Officer Reed bent down and picked them up. Two assistant managers, both personally hired by Vernon, quietly slipped through a side door before human resources could reach them. They were not subtle. They moved quickly enough that everyone noticed. Marissa watched them disappear, then lifted her phone. Review every personnel decision Caldwell made during his management tenure. I want promotions, complaints, disciplinary actions, and hiring records. Vernon was escorted across the lobby toward the entrance. He passed Renee Lawson, who did not look at him. He passed the string quartet, who did not look at him. He passed the bellhop, who looked directly at him and waited until the last possible moment before stepping aside. The doors closed behind Vernon Caldwell. His career at Whitfield was over. Darius turned back toward the lobby. The ruined tuxedo rested on the floor. The broken watch was in his pocket. The cut on his thumb had nearly stopped bleeding. Across the room, Natalie Foster emerged from the security camera room. Her phone was still in her hand. The upload behind her had finished. Darius walked toward her. Natalie, we're going to talk. Not today, but soon. She nodded. She could not speak. Darius turned toward Camille. One word. Coffee. For the first time since she entered the lobby, Camille laughed. But the story did not end when Vernon walked through those doors. It was only beginning. The first thing that followed was an internal investigation. Marissa Vaughn and Celeste Harper moved into a conference room at Whitaker Holdings and began pulling records from every corner of Whitfield Hospitality Group. Personnel decisions, guest complaints, internal emails, incident reports, keycard logs, settlement records, management reviews. The more they found, the worse the picture became. Across Vernon's years at the Grand Manor, investigators identified 23 documented incidents in which black or brown guests had been denied service, required to provide additional identification, or removed from the property under circumstances that could not be justified by normal policy. 8 complaints involving the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission had been quietly settled under the previous ownership, with payments ranging from $12,000 to $90,000. Then investigators found an email folder labeled Priority Guests. It contained the clients Vernon personally approved for premium upgrades. Every name on the list belonged to a white guest. The pattern was impossible to explain away as coincidence. 2 assistant managers were terminated after investigators reviewed their roles. 5 mid-level employees who had repeatedly looked the other way were placed into mandatory anti-bias retraining. Several resigned before completing it. More employees from Vernon's protected inner circle soon left as well. Some claimed the company was changing too much. Others simply understood that investigators were moving closer to the decisions they had helped make, defend, or conceal. They resigned before anyone could fire them. The story eventually reached the national press. The Washington Post published a major report about what happened inside the Whitfield lobby, focusing on the wedding, the broken pocket watch, and the extraordinary reversal that followed. Cable News Network aired a segment. 60 Minutes requested an interview. Darius agreed to speak publicly once, only once. He sat in the living room of his Georgetown brownstone. The repaired pieces of his grandfather's pocket watch rested on the coffee table between him and the reporter. Darius did not gloat. He did not celebrate Vernon's downfall. He did not speak with anger. He talked about Elijah Whitaker. He talked about a man who worked in a steel mill for 41 years and still pressed his own shirt before church because he believed dignity lived in the small things people did when no one was watching. Then Darius said something that stayed with millions of viewers. There is a difference between not knowing and choosing not to find out. Vernon had a booking system. He had a printed roster. He had an event coordinator he could call. He had staff members telling him the truth. He had Darius's identification in his hand. He had every tool he needed to verify what was right in front of him. He simply chose not to use any of them. During the same interview, Darius announced the creation of the Elijah Whitaker Scholarship Fund. $10 million, fully funded by the parent company. The scholarships would be awarded to children of hospitality workers and working families, bellhops, housekeepers, cleaners, line cooks, valets, bus drivers, people like Elijah Whitaker and Curtis Bennett, who spent their lives working so the generation after them could stand somewhere they themselves had never been allowed to reach. The first awards would be made later. Meanwhile, the legal consequences continued. Camille Bennett became lead counsel in a class action connected to the pattern uncovered at Whitfield. She did not bill her time. Barrett and Lane waived its fees. The class eventually included 84 former Whitfield guests whose experiences had been identified through the internal investigation. Whitaker Holdings moved quickly to resolve the company's share of responsibility. The company agreed to an $18.5 million settlement distributed among the class members. Darius made the decision without hesitation. Ownership had changed, but he believed responsibility did not disappear merely because the people signing the checks were different. If an institution had harmed people, then the institution had a duty to help repair that harm. Vernon, however, refused to settle his personal liability. He hired an inexpensive employment attorney named Calvin Mercer, who worked from a small office above a tax preparation business in Reston. Calvin told Vernon they might be able to win on procedure. Vernon believed him. The case moved slowly through discovery, depositions, and motions. Vernon sat for hours of questioning across multiple sessions. He did not perform well. Again and again, attorneys returned to the same issue. Why did he refuse to verify Darius's identity when proof was available within a few steps? Why did he invent procedures that did not exist? Why did he search personal property without consent? Why did he ignore employees who told him Darius was the groom? Why did he treat this guest differently from others? Vernon's answers changed. The evidence did not. Eventually, the case reached trial in federal court before Judge Eleanor Price. Camille delivered the opening statement. She did not shout. She did not dramatize what the evidence already made clear. She simply walked the jury through the lobby and counter, step by step. Darius entering with a garment bag, Vernon confronting him before checking the booking sheet, the tuxedo tearing, the driver's license being inspected and discarded, the bag being opened without consent, the pocket watch falling, the crystal breaking, Darius kneeling on the marble, the second tear in the jacket, Camille arriving, the corporate team entering, the termination. Then she showed the jury the records that came after, the old complaints, the internal reports, the settled cases, the priority guest list, and, most important, she introduced the security footage Natalie had preserved from the camera room. She introduced the phone videos recorded by witnesses in the lobby. She introduced the booking sheet that had been sitting in plain view while Vernon insisted there was no way to verify Darius. During cross-examination, Camille walked Vernon through his own employee handbook, guest verification, search of personal property, physical contact with members of the public, incident escalation, discrimination policy. Each time, she asked the same simple question. Mr. Caldwell, did you follow this policy when Darius Whitaker entered the Whitfield Grand Manor? Again and again, Vernon had to answer, no. Then Camille played the security footage. The courtroom watched Vernon seize the duffel. They watched the pocket watch fall. They watched Darius drop to his knees. They watched the torn jacket. They watched the license land on the marble. They watched employees point out the booking sheet. They watched Vernon refuse to look. When the footage ended, Camille allowed the silence to remain. Then she asked her final question. Mr. Caldwell, during your years as general manager of the Whitfield Grand Manor, can you name one white guest whom you personally subjected to the same kind of forced verification and physical removal before checking whether that guest was legitimately booked? Vernon opened his mouth, then closed it. I can't recall one. Camille nodded. No further questions. The jury found Vernon personally liable on every count presented to them. They awarded $2.3 million in punitive damages. His financial life collapsed soon afterward. His house entered foreclosure. The pension benefits tied to his employment were already gone. His marriage began to fall apart, and his wife eventually filed for separation. When the proceedings ended, Judge Eleanor Price addressed the courtroom. What happened here was not simply a misunderstanding, she said. The defendant had tools available to verify the truth. A booking system, a printed roster, an event coordinator, a telephone, employees who were giving him accurate information. He chose not to use them. That distinction matters. There is a difference between making an honest mistake and refusing to check the facts because an assumption feels more convenient. The law recognizes that difference. Vernon did not appeal. He could not afford to. Eventually, he left the area and moved to a small town in West Virginia. He found work behind the counter of a discount auto parts store, operating a register that did not face the street. His name tag read Vernon Caldwell. He gave no interviews. He wrote no book. He did not appear at public events. He simply disappeared into a quieter life shaped by the consequences of choices he once believed carried no cost. It had all begun in the lobby of a building where he held power. A man walked in. His name was on the booking sheet. His company name was on the closing documents. The truth was available. Vernon simply chose not to look. But before the investigation, before the newspaper stories, before the lawsuit, before the courtroom, there was still a wedding. The Grand Manor lobby eventually settled into a strange quiet. Vendors returned to work. The string quartet began tuning again. Officer Reed returned to his post, standing a little straighter than before. Darius's tuxedo could not be saved. The shoulder seam was destroyed. The fabric had separated in several places. Marissa Vaughn made a phone call. A tailor from a shop on Connecticut Avenue was brought to the venue with a freshly fitted black tuxedo inside a clean garment bag. The trousers were adjusted. The jacket was fitted. The final details were finished in time. Darius stood at the altar in the gardens wearing a tuxedo he had never expected to need. The white peonies moved gently in the breeze. The fountain whispered behind the rows of chairs. Then Camille appeared at the far end of the stone path. Her father, Curtis Bennett, stood beside her. He had driven a city bus for 31 years, mostly the U Street route. He had saved money slowly, one paycheck at a time, so his daughter could attend Howard Law. Now he wore a charcoal suit Darius had bought for him as a gift Curtis had accepted awkwardly because he had spent most of his life giving rather than receiving. Curtis cried almost the entire walk down the aisle. He cried when Camille slipped her arm through his. He cried as they passed the fountain. He cried when he placed his daughter's hand into Darius's. Then he cried again when he sat beside his wife in the front row. Darius's grandmother, now in her 80s, cried through much of the ceremony too. She held a folded handkerchief that had once belonged to Elijah, and inside Darius's vest pocket rested the broken gold watch. He wore it anyway. The crystal was cracked. The mechanism had stopped, but the watch rested against his ribs through every word of every vow. Later, a jeweler restored it. The crystal was replaced. The internal mechanism was carefully rebuilt by hand. Darius wore the watch on every wedding anniversary that followed. The original tuxedo was never thrown away either. The torn one. The one Vernon had damaged in the lobby. Eventually, it was placed behind glass inside Whitfield Properties. Beneath it sat a small brass plaque. It read, "Worn on the morning we decided to do better. Darius Whitaker." The company changed. Not overnight. Not through slogans. Through policy. Through hiring. Through accountability. Through measurements that were reviewed rather than hidden. Through complaints that were investigated instead of buried. Through training that was connected to consequences. Through leadership that understood hospitality could not be called hospitality if dignity depended on what someone looked like when they walked through the door. In the years that followed, Whitfield Hospitality Group entered the strongest financial period in its history. Bookings from Black, Latino, and Asian clients rose sharply. The company completed independent diversity audits. The Elijah Whitaker Scholarship Fund made its first 22 awards. One recipient was the daughter of a hotel housekeeper from Detroit. Another was the son of a valet from Atlanta. Another was a young woman from Pittsburgh whose grandfather had worked at the same steel mill as Elijah Whitaker. Their shifts had overlapped for years without either family knowing that their grandchildren would one day be connected by a scholarship created from a broken pocket watch. Camille and Darius later welcomed a baby girl. They named her Grace. She had her father's eyes and her mother's mouth. Natalie Foster was promoted. The woman who had quietly locked herself inside a security camera room, preserved evidence, and called the ethics hotline became general manager of a new Whitfield property in Charleston, South Carolina. At her welcome dinner, Darius raised a glass and called her one of the bravest employees he had ever worked with. Natalie cried briefly into her napkin. Adrian Brooks became the youngest general manager in Whitfield history. He ran the Grand Manor with a quiet, careful hand. Officer Reed was promoted to Director of Security. He kept a printed copy of the Bennett Whitaker booking sheet inside his desk drawer. Sometimes he looked at it, not because he needed proof of what had happened, because he wanted to remember the moment when he had seen the truth, known where it was, and hesitated. That page reminded him that hesitation is also a choice. Much later, during a podcast interview, Darius was asked what he had learned from that morning. He sat quietly for a moment before answering. "I learned that some of the most dangerous prejudice doesn't always announce itself loudly," he said. "Sometimes it hides behind procedure. Sometimes it calls itself policy. Sometimes it has every tool needed to check an assumption and simply chooses not to." Then he smiled. "I also learned something about Camille. I almost married her without telling her I had just bought the venue. I'm glad she didn't need that information to know who I was. She walked into that lobby, saw what was wrong, and handled it with more clarity than I did." The interviewer asked whether Darius regretted arriving early. Darius shook his head. No, he regretted the pain. He regretted the watch breaking. He regretted that employees and guests had been harmed before anyone took the pattern seriously. But he did not regret seeing the truth. Sometimes, he explained, a painful moment reveals a problem that has been hidden for years. The question is what you do after you see it. Do you protect the institution? Do you protect your pride? Do you protect the person who caused the harm because dealing with the truth feels inconvenient? Or do you decide that accountability matters more than comfort? That morning, many people in the lobby had choices. Vernon had the clearest one. He could have checked the roster. He could have made a phone call. He could have listened to Renee. He could have listened to Natalie. He could have handed Darius his license and apologized. He could have stopped at almost any point. He did not. Officer Reed had a choice too. He saw the booking sheet. He knew something was wrong. He hesitated. That hesitation stayed with him long after Vernon was gone. Natalie had a choice. She could have obeyed Vernon's order and disappeared into the back office. Instead, she went into the camera room, preserved the footage, and documented what she saw. Renee had a choice. She spoke up even after Vernon dismissed her. Camille had a choice. She entered the lobby on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life and found the man she loved standing in the wreckage of someone else's prejudice. She did not respond with chaos. She responded with clarity. Darius had choices too. He could have revealed his ownership immediately. He could have humiliated Vernon with his wealth. He could have announced, "Do you know who I am?" and watched everyone change their tone. Instead, he kept asking for the simplest thing. Check the booking. Look at the facts. Treat me like a person. That is part of what makes the story so difficult. Darius should never have needed to be wealthy to be believed. He should never have needed to own the building. He should never have needed a lawyer, fiancé, a corporate counsel, a chief of staff, or a billion-dollar company behind his name in order to deserve basic respect. Even if he had been a delivery driver. Even if he had been a guest who entered the wrong door. Even if the tuxedo had really been rented. Even if the watch had cost $10 instead of carrying a family's history. The standard should have been the same. Respect first. Verification when necessary. Facts before assumptions. Dignity always. That was the lesson the company eventually placed behind glass with the torn tuxedo. Not that powerful people should be treated well because they may secretly own the building. That would miss the point entirely. The real lesson was that no one should have to prove their wealth, title, education, or influence before being treated with basic human decency. A person does not become worthy when you discover their resume. They were worthy before you knew their name. And the story was not only about Vernon. It was also about the room around him. The florist who covered her mouth. The musicians who stopped playing. The guests who raised their phones. The waiter who stopped folding napkins. Officer Reed standing close enough to see the booking sheet. Some people spoke. Some recorded. Some froze. That is human. Many of us do not know exactly how we will respond when something wrong happens suddenly in front of us. Fear can make people quiet. Authority can make people doubt what they clearly see. We tell ourselves someone else will handle it. We worry that speaking will make things worse. We hope the moment will pass. But sometimes the smallest act matters. A simple question. Have you checked the list? A calm interruption. That's not what happened. A decision to preserve evidence. A refusal to laugh. A step toward someone who has been left standing alone. Courage does not always look dramatic. Sometimes courage is simply deciding not to participate in someone else's humiliation. And accountability does not have to be cruelty. That matters too. Darius did not build a scholarship fund because he wanted revenge. He did not repair the company by teaching employees to hate Vernon. He changed systems. He created opportunities. He paid settlements to people who had been harmed. He promoted people who showed integrity. He kept the broken watch. He kept the torn tuxedo, not as trophies, as reminders. Consequences are part of responsibility. But consequences and compassion are not enemies. A person can believe in forgiveness and still believe that actions matter. A company can move forward and still tell the truth about what happened. A family can heal without pretending a wound never existed. A person can regret a mistake and still be required to repair what that mistake damaged. That is how trust is rebuilt. Not with perfect words, with changed behavior, with time, with humility, with the willingness to do better even when no one is applauding. Elijah Whitaker spent 41 years working in a steel mill. He probably never imagined that the watch he gave his grandson would one day become part of a national story. To him, it was simply a gift. A way of saying, I worked hard so you could go farther. Make us proud. Years later, the watch broke on a marble floor because another man looked at Elijah's grandson and decided he did not belong. But the story did not end with broken glass. The watch was repaired. The company changed. Students received scholarships. Employees found opportunities. Guests who had been mistreated were heard. A daughter named Grace entered the world. And a torn tuxedo became a reminder that dignity should never depend on appearance. Maybe that is the most hopeful part of all. We cannot always choose what happens to us. We cannot control another person's assumptions. We cannot undo every hurtful moment after it happens. But we can choose what we build from what remains. We can choose not to pass pain forward. We can choose to turn a bad experience into a better policy, a broken object into a reminder, a painful memory into an opportunity for someone else, a moment of silence into a reason to speak next time. That does not erase what happened. It gives the pain somewhere meaningful to go. So think about the rooms you have been in: a workplace, a restaurant, a school, a family gathering, a store, a hotel lobby. Have you ever watched someone be treated differently because of how they looked, how they spoke, what they wore, where they came from, or what job they had? Did you say something? Did you freeze? Did you walk away and wish later that you had acted differently? There is no value in pretending we have always been brave. Honesty is more useful. The important question is what we do the next time. Maybe next time we ask one more question. Maybe we verify before we assume. Maybe we refuse to join the joke. Maybe we stand beside the person who looks alone. Maybe we remember that everyone walking into a room carries a life we cannot see. A grandfather who worked with his hands. A father who drove a bus for decades. A mother who saved every spare dollar. A dream someone protected quietly for years. A family story folded inside a pocket. We rarely know what another person is carrying. That is exactly why kindness should come before judgment. Darius walked into the Whitfield Grand Manor carrying a tuxedo, a duffel bag, his father's cufflinks, and his grandfather's watch. Vernon saw only what he had already decided to see. That was his failure. Not that he failed to recognize a wealthy owner, that he failed to recognize a human being. So stay kind, stay alert, ask questions before making assumptions. And when you see someone being treated unfairly, remember that courage does not always require a speech. Sometimes it begins with one sentence. This isn't right. Sometimes it begins with one step, standing beside someone instead of watching from a distance. And sometimes it begins with something even simpler, looking at another person and remembering that their dignity does not need your permission. If this story made you think about a moment from your own life, share that reflection in the comments. Maybe you spoke up. Maybe you wish you had. Maybe someone once stood beside you when you needed it most. Those stories matter too. Share this story with someone who may need the reminder. And subscribe for more stories about justice, responsibility, courage, second chances, and the quiet choices that reveal who we really are. Because every person who walks through a door deserves the dignity they arrived with. Not after we learn their title, not after we see their bank account, not after someone important tells us who they are. From the very first moment, we all carry the same basic human worth. Different jobs, different names, different histories, different skin, different circumstances. But the same need to be seen, heard, and treated with respect. Sometimes living decently is not complicated. Slow down, check the facts, listen when someone speaks, own the harm when you get it wrong, make amends where you can. Choose kindness before you know what someone can do for you, and never judge a person's worth by the door they walked through.